My granddaughter's 8th birthday party was meant to be a celebration. Instead, my own son raised his champagne glass in front of 40 guests and said, "Let's toast to the people who actually built this family, and to Dad, who at least tried his best with what little he had." Everyone laughed. My wife stared into her plate. I smiled, raised my glass, and said nothing. But 3 weeks later, that same son was kneeling on my front porch in the rain, sobbing, asking me to save him from going to prison. I'm grateful you found this story. Stay with me until the end, and please drop a comment telling me which town or city you're listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel across our country and beyond. My name is Reginald Whitcomb, and at 64 years old, I never imagined the boy I'd carried on my shoulders through the bushland near our old place in Ballarat would one day humiliate me in front of half our extended family. But that's exactly what Bradley did the afternoon of little Poppy's birthday. We were at his enormous house in the Brighton suburbs of Melbourne, a 6-bedroom Federation home with views that stretched all the way to the bay. The kind of place that makes you feel underdressed even in your good shirt. My wife Eleanor had spent the morning helping our daughter-in-law Tamsin with the catering, though helping mostly meant being told where to stand and what not to touch. Tamsin had imported French pastry chefs for the occasion. French pastry chefs for an 8-year-old's birthday. That should have told me everything I needed to know about the people my son had become. The garden was full of guests I barely recognized. Bradley's business associates, Tamsin's tennis club friends, parents from Poppy's private girls' school in Toorak. I stood near the fountain with a beer in my hand, trying to look like I belonged. Eleanor moved through the crowd with that practiced smile she'd developed over the years. The one that said, "Please don't notice me. Please don't ask me anything difficult." When it came time for the toast, Bradley climbed up onto the limestone steps near the back doors and tapped his glass with a silver dessert spoon. The crowd quieted. He looked magnificent up there, tailored navy blazer, expensive watch catching the afternoon sun, the confident posture of a man who believed the world had been built specifically for him. "Friends, family, distinguished guests," he began, his voice carrying that polished tone he used when he was performing. "Today we celebrate our beautiful Poppy. But I also want to acknowledge the people who made this family what it is today." He gestured toward Tamsin, who blew him a kiss. "My darling wife, who keeps our home running like a Swiss watch. My beautiful daughter Poppy, the light of our lives. My mother Eleanor, whose quiet strength has held our family together for decades." People nodded warmly. Eleanor blushed and looked at her shoes. Then Bradley turned toward me, and his smile shifted into something I'd never quite seen before. Not cruel exactly. Something worse. Something like pity. And to my father, Reginald, who, despite his humble beginnings as a council worker in country Victoria, did his best to provide for us with what little he had. "Dad, you tried. And in this family, we appreciate effort, even when the results don't quite match what we needed." To Dad for trying. The laughter that followed wasn't loud. It was worse than loud. It was that polite, embarrassed chuckling that adults do when they don't know how to react to something inappropriate but feel obliged to play along. Tamsin's mother actually said, "Oh dear," out loud and put her hand to her mouth. One of Bradley's business mates raised his glass and called out, "To trying." I felt the heat climb up my neck and into my face. Eleanor's eyes were locked on the ground. My 10-year-old grandson Rupert, Poppy's older brother, looked confused and turned to his mother for some kind of explanation. Tamsin just smiled and shrugged at him. I raised my glass. I smiled. I said nothing. I drank. Because what could I have said? That Bradley's humble beginnings as a council worker had paid for his Melbourne University degree? That the deposit on his first house had come from my superannuation? That the limestone fountain he was standing next to had been partially funded by money I'd quietly transferred to him 18 months ago when Tamsin had wanted to renovate the garden? No. I just stood there and drank my beer and tried to remember when my son had stopped seeing me as a man. The party carried on. The French pastries were served. Poppy opened her mountain of presents. Eleanor and I left earlier than the others, claiming a long drive back to our place in Geelong, though it was barely an hour away. In the car, Eleanor finally spoke. "I'm sorry, Reg." "For what, love?" "For not saying anything." I reached over and squeezed her hand. Neither did I. We drove the rest of the way in silence, watching the lights of the highway blur past. But inside my chest, something was changing. Not anger. Anger I could have understood. This was something colder. Something that felt almost like waking up after a very long sleep. That night I sat out on our back deck looking at the stars over Corio Bay, and I started doing something I should have done years ago. I started counting. Not memories. Money. I'd given Bradley his first car at 18. A used Holden Commodore. $2,000. His university fees, 4 years at Melbourne. All up about $38,000 back in the early 90s. The deposit on his first apartment in Carlton, $22,000. When he and Tamsin got engaged and wanted a wedding worthy of her family's standing, I'd quietly handed him a check for $45,000. The down payment on the Brighton house had been another $60,000 from me, on top of a personal guarantee I'd signed for the mortgage that, to this very night, I had never been released from. Then there were the smaller, ongoing bleeds. $5,000 for Tamsin's miscarriage trip to Bali to recover, even though I'd later learnt they'd flown business class. $8,000 for Rupert's prep school enrollment fees. $12,000 last winter when Bradley said his investment property in Cairns needed urgent repairs. $3,000, the month before that, for Poppy's ballet camp in Sydney. Sitting there in the dark, I added it up in my head as best I could. Somewhere north of $240,000 over the years. Maybe closer to $300. And Eleanor and I were living on my council pension, her part-time bookkeeping income, and what was left of our savings, which wasn't a great deal, because most of it had gone to Bradley. And my son had just stood in front of 40 people and toasted me for trying. I don't remember when I went to bed. I just remember staring at the ceiling for a long time, and somewhere around 3 in the morning, making myself a quiet promise. No more. Whatever came next, no more. The next morning I rang an old friend. Now, I should say, Geelong's a smaller town than Melbourne, and people who grew up there together tend to stay connected. Douglas Hartigan and I had worked at the council together for 31 years. He'd left to take a senior role in compliance at one of the bigger banks in Melbourne, and we still met up for a beer at the RSL every couple of months. "Reg, mate, what's the occasion? You don't usually ring me on a Sunday." "Doug, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me. Has Bradley got any accounts at your bank?" There was a long pause on the line. "You know I can't talk about specific customers, mate." "I know. But I'm asking you as a friend. Has he?" Another pause. Longer this time. "Reg, I think you and I need to have a yarn in person. Can you come up to the city this week?" I drove up to Melbourne on the Tuesday. We met at a quiet coffee shop in Collins Street, well away from his branch. Doug looked uncomfortable from the moment he sat down. "Reg, before I say anything, I need you to understand I'm taking a hell of a risk telling you any of this. But you and I served on too many crew shifts together for me to sit on what I know." My stomach started to drop. "What is it, Doug?" "Your name's on 3 commercial loan documents at our bank that I don't believe you've ever signed." The coffee in front of me went cold. I just stared at him. "What do you mean, 3? 3 personal guarantees. Total exposure to you, if Bradley defaults, is around $180,000. The signatures look genuine, witnessed by a solicitor's clerk in Hawthorne each time. But Reg, I've signed forms with you for 30 years. Those signatures are good. but they're not yours. The pressure of the pen is wrong. The way you finish your D is wrong. Whoever signed them knows what your signature looks like, but they're not you. I sat there in that coffee shop on Collins Street, and I felt something inside me actually go quiet. Not break, not snap. Just go very, very still. Doug. What are these loans for? 2 of them are listed as business expansion. 1 is listed as property investment in Queensland. What's Bradley's business? As far as the bank's concerned. Doug looked even more uncomfortable. That's the other thing, mate. He told us he runs a financial advisory firm with 12 staff. We've got it on file as Hartwell Capital Advisors. But I had a junior officer do a quick search before you came up, just to be sure of what I was telling you. Hartwell Capital Advisors has 1 employee, Bradley. He's running it out of a serviced office in South Yarra. There's no 12 staff. There's no team. He sublets a desk. I drove home that afternoon with my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Halfway down the Prince's Highway, I had to pull over at a service station because I couldn't focus on the road. Bradley didn't run a successful firm. Bradley hadn't been running anything successful for years. And somewhere in there, somewhere in the polished navy blazer and the limestone fountain and the imported French pastries, my son had been forging my signature on commercial loan documents. I didn't tell Eleanor that night. I couldn't bring myself to. I just told her I'd had a bad headache from the drive, and I went to bed early. The next 2 weeks I went quiet. I started watching. I started listening properly to the things Bradley said, and to the things he didn't say. I rang Tamsin's older sister Margot, who'd always been the kindest one in that family, and the only one who'd ever treated Eleanor like a real human being. We'd swapped Christmas cards for years. I made up some small reason to ring her something about a recipe of Eleanor's, and we got to chatting. "Reg, while I've got you," she said eventually, her voice dropping a little, "I should probably mention something. Mum's getting a bit fed up with hearing Tamsin go on about how generous you and Eleanor are. Apparently you're paying for all of Poppy's school fees and most of Rupert's extras as well, because Bradley's firm is going through a rough patch." I closed my eyes there in the kitchen, holding the phone. "Margot, I've never paid for Poppy's school fees." The silence on the other end of the line told me everything. "Oh, Reg. Oh, love. Tamsin's been telling everyone you insisted. She's been making you out to be this overbearing old grandfather who throws money around and then makes them feel guilty about it. Mum's been complaining about you for 2 years. I just assumed there was some truth in it." I sat down at the kitchen table and put my head in my free hand. "There's no truth in it, Margot. Not a word. Reg. There's something else. I shouldn't say this, but Tamsin told Mum that when you and Eleanor are gone, Bradley's going to inherit your house in Geelong, and they've already been talking to a developer about subdividing the block. They've been planning it for months." Eleanor walked into the kitchen at that exact moment, carrying a basket of folded washing. She must have seen something in my face, because she put the basket down and just stood there, waiting. I thanked Margot, said goodbye, and hung up. Then I told my wife everything. The toast, Doug, the bank, the forged signatures, Hartwell Capital with its 1 employee, Tamsin's stories about us, the plan to subdivide our home. Eleanor sat down opposite me. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She just stared at her own hands for a long time. And then she said something that has stayed with me ever since. "Reg, I think we made him this way." "What do you mean, love?" "Every time he came to us with a problem, we solved it for him. Every time he made a mess, we cleaned it up. And we did it because we loved him. We thought that was love. But we never let him stand on his own legs. So now he doesn't know how. And he's angry at us because he can feel the difference between him and the men around him who actually built their own lives. He just doesn't know that the difference is us. I'd been married to that woman for 41 years, and she still had the capacity to stop me in my tracks. What do we do, Elle? We stop. And we stop completely. And whatever happens to him after we stop, that's the life he's actually built, not the one we built for him. The next morning I rang a solicitor. Her name was Priya Anand. She'd been recommended to me by an old workmate, whose mother had been swindled by a carer years before. Priya specialized in what she called elder financial protection, a phrase I hadn't even known existed until that week. I sat in her office in Fitzroy and laid out everything in front of her. Doug's evidence, the forged loan documents, the fake firm, the mortgage guarantee on Bradley's house, the cards he was an authorized user on, the personal guarantees, Tamsin stories, the subdivision plan. Priya listened without interrupting for nearly 40 minutes. When I was done, she took off her glasses and looked at me very steadily. Mr. Whitcomb, what your son has been doing is fraud. Specifically, it's loan fraud. And it's a criminal offense under both Commonwealth and Victorian law. The bank, once formally notified, is legally obliged to investigate. Once they confirm the signatures are forged, they have an obligation to refer the matter to the police. Whether they prosecute is up to the Director of Public Prosecutions. But your son, if convicted, is looking at a custodial sentence. Real prison, not a fine, not community work. Prison. I sat there in her office and felt the weight of every choice I'd made for the past 36 years sitting on my shoulders. What do I do then? Priya leaned forward. You have two paths. Path 1, you go to the bank, formally repudiate the signatures, and let the law take its course. Path 2, you give your son one chance to come clean himself. He goes to the bank with you. He admits the fraud. He works out a repayment arrangement. The bank may agree not to refer the matter, especially if you withdraw any complaint. But that's not guaranteed. And once you tell him you know, he becomes a flight risk, an asset hider, or worse, suicidal. So if you choose path 2, you do it carefully. I sat back. I thought about the boy I'd taught to ride a push bike in the laneway behind our old place. The teenager I'd watched walk across the stage at his graduation. The young man who'd hugged me at his wedding and said, "Thanks, Dad. None of this happens without you." I want to give him one chance, Priya. One. But not for the reason you might think. Not because I'm trying to save him from prison. I want to give him one chance to be the kind of man who can look his father in the eye and tell the truth without being forced. If he can do that, there might be something left to work with. If he can't, then he's already in prison. He's just not behind bars yet. Priya nodded slowly. Then here's what we do. We prepare everything quietly. We get you out from under every guarantee, every authorized user agreement, every piece of paper that makes you legally exposed. We change every account. We update every will and beneficiary nomination. We do all of this before you say a single word to him. Once you're protected, then and only then do you have the conversation. For the next month, Eleanor and I worked through Priya's list. We opened new accounts at a credit union in Geelong that Bradley had no knowledge of. We rolled over my superannuation remnants into a new fund. We canceled every credit card he was attached to. We notified the bank, in writing, that I revoked any and all guarantees I had given for any loans bearing my signature, both past and future. Priya filed an affidavit denying the signatures on the 3 commercial loans. We changed our wills so that the Geelong house, when we eventually went, would go to a trust that paid an income to our daughter Felicity in Adelaide and her 2 children, with no access for Bradley. It was the hardest month of my marriage and the most peaceful, both at once. In the middle of it, Bradley rang me twice to ask for money. The first time it was $4,000 for Tamsin's mother's birthday cruise. Apparently the family was chipping in. The second time, 2 weeks later, it was $9,000 for what he called a short-term liquidity issue at the firm. Both times I told him I needed to think about it and would ring him back. Both times I never rang him back. The first one he just let slide. The second one he didn't. He turned up at our door on a Saturday morning in early September. Tamsin wasn't with him. The kids weren't with him. He looked tired. Eleanor opened the door, kissed his cheek as she always did, and let him in. She poured him a coffee and then quietly went out into the garden to give us privacy. We'd agreed she would. Bradley sat at the kitchen table where he'd done his homework as a boy, and he looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Dad, about the 9,000. I really need it. The firm's got an opportunity, but I need to move on it this week. Bradley, tell me about Hartwell Capital Advisors. He blinked. What about it? How many staff? 12. You know that. How many? A pause. He shifted in his chair. Dad, why are you asking me that? Because last month I learned that Hartwell Capital Advisors has one employee. You. Operating out of a sublet desk in South Yarra. Tell me I'm wrong, son. Please. Tell me Doug Hartigan got it wrong. The color went out of his face. He didn't speak for a long moment. Then his eyes hardened. Doug Hartigan should mind his own business. And so should you, frankly. Bradley. There are also 3 commercial loans at that bank. Personal guarantees in my name. Signatures I never signed. He went very still. I kept going. My voice was quiet. I wasn't shouting. I'd spent a lifetime not shouting at this boy. And I wasn't about to start now. I've already revoked the guarantees in writing. I've already filed an affidavit denying the signatures. The bank is investigating. Whether they refer this to the police is not my decision anymore, son. It's the bank's. And then it's the prosecutors. He stood up so fast his chair scraped across the kitchen tiles. You did what? I protected myself and your mother. I should have done it years ago. Dad, listen to me. You can't do this. This will destroy me. This will destroy my marriage. This will destroy the kids. I didn't do this, Bradley. You did. I just stopped covering for what you did. He started pacing the kitchen, running his hands through his hair. The polished blazer version of my son was gone. What I was looking at was a frightened man in his late 30s who had built his entire adult life on top of someone else's signature. How much do you need to fix it? He said suddenly. How much to make this go away? Name the figure. I'll find it. I looked at my son, and for the first time in 20 years, I really saw him. Bradley. There is no figure. I'm not for sale. I never was. And the worst part is, you don't even know that's the most insulting thing you've said to me today. He left without saying goodbye. He pulled out of the driveway so fast he sprayed gravel against the letterbox. Eleanor came back inside and sat with me at the kitchen table, and we held each other's hands, and we didn't say a word for a very long time. 3 weeks passed. We didn't hear from him. We did hear, through Margot, that Tamsin had moved out and taken the children to her parents' place in Hawthorne. We heard that Bradley had lost the lease on the South Yarra office. We heard that the bank had moved formally to call in the loans, and that yes, the matter had been referred to the police. And then, on a wet Wednesday evening in October, my son knelt on my front porch in the rain and cried. I'd been watching telly when the doorbell rang. Eleanor went to answer it, and I heard her sharp intake of breath, and then I heard her say, very softly, "Oh, my boy." I came to the door and there was Bradley, on his knees, soaked through, his hair plastered to his forehead, his face streaked with rain and something else. Dad, please. I've got a court date. Priya, your solicitor. She rang my lawyer. She said if I voluntarily make full restitution and you and the bank both write character considerations, I might avoid prison. But I can't make full restitution. I haven't got it. I haven't got any of it. Tamsin's gone. The house is going. The car's going. The firm's gone. Dad, please. I'm begging you. I'm begging you. I looked down at my son on my own front porch, and I felt every year of his life pass through me at once. The tiny boy who'd fallen asleep on my chest watching the cricket. The teenager who'd cried in my arms when his first girlfriend left him. The young father who'd phoned me at midnight, terrified, when newborn Rupert had a fever. All of them were inside this man kneeling in the rain. And so was the man who had toasted me for trying. In front of 40 people. Stand up, Bradley. Get inside. You'll catch your death. Eleanor brought him a towel. She brought him dry clothes, a tracksuit of mine that hung loose on him because he'd lost weight. She made him a hot tea. She did all of this without saying a word. Because that's the kind of mother she has always been. When he was warm and dry and sitting at the kitchen table again, I sat down opposite him. Bradley, I'm not going to write the bank a check. I want to be clear about that, because I want you to hear what I say next without confusion. There is no check coming. Not now. Not next week. Not ever again. He nodded. He was crying, quietly. He didn't argue. What I will do is this. I will write the court a letter. I will tell them the truth. That you are my son. That you have made very serious mistakes. That you have, since being confronted, shown signs of understanding the gravity of what you've done. I will tell them that I am not seeking restitution from you personally, because the loss is, in a real sense, my failure as much as yours. I will not ask them to be soft on you. I will ask them to be just. That's all I will do. He nodded again. Beyond that, here is what I expect of you. You will get a job. Any job. Tomorrow morning. There is a man named Trevor Bates who runs a small landscaping outfit out of Werribee. He owes me a favor from 20 years back. I will ring him tonight. He will give you a start as a laborer if you turn up at 6 in the morning. The pay is honest, the work is hard, and he doesn't care what you used to do for a crust. You will go to Gamblers Anonymous if there is gambling involved here. Which, son, I suspect there is, and don't lie to me about it now, of all times. You will go to counseling. You will write a letter, in your own hand, to your mother, apologizing for the way Tamsin has spoken about her in the family. You will, when this court business is over and if Tamsin will allow it, work, and I mean work. Every day of your life to be a father your children can be proud of, not a wallet. A father. He was nodding through tears. He couldn't get words out. And one last thing. You will never again, as long as I live, raise a glass to me in front of other people unless you can do it honestly. Are we clear? He looked up at me. And for the first time in many, many years, I saw my son. Not the performance. Not the navy blazer. Just my boy. Yes, Dad. We're clear. The court date came 2 months later. The judge, a woman in her 50s with kind but very tired eyes, accepted the joint submission. Bradley pleaded guilty to 2 counts of obtaining financial advantage by deception. He received a 2-year sentence, fully suspended on conditions, including ongoing repayment to the bank, supervised treatment for problem gambling, which, yes, it turned out, had been the engine of all of this, and 300 hours of community service. He kept his job at Trevor's landscaping outfit. He still has it now, 18 months on. He's a foreman these days. He's lost about 20 kilos. His hands are calloused for the first time in his life. Tamsin did not come back. She filed for divorce. The Brighton house was sold to settle debts, and she and the children now live in a modest semi in Hawthorne near her parents. She has, to her credit, allowed Bradley to have the children every second weekend. Supervised at first, unsupervised now. Rupert is 12. Poppy is nearly 10. They come down to Geelong with their father once a month, and Eleanor makes scones, and we walk along the waterfront, and we are slowly becoming a family. Last Christmas, Bradley sat at our table in the modest dining room of our modest Geelong home. There were only 6 of us, Eleanor and me, Bradley, the 2 kids, and our daughter Felicity, who'd flown over from Adelaide. Felicity, who had quietly stood by us through all of it. Before we ate, Bradley stood up. He held no glass this time. He held only a folded piece of paper. "I've written something. I'd like to read it if you'll let me. Mum, Dad, Felicity, Rupert, Poppy, I spent a long time being someone I'm not, in front of people who didn't matter, while ignoring the people who did. I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worth the second chance I've been given. I love you all. And Dad, there's only one head of this table, and it's not me. It never was. I'm just very lucky he still lets me sit at it." Eleanor cried. Felicity cried. Rupert, who is at that age where boys try desperately not to cry, looked down at his lap. Poppy patted her father's hand. I didn't cry. I just looked at my son, and I nodded. And I said, "Sit down, mate. Your tea's getting cold. Now I want to talk to you for a moment. You who are listening, because I didn't share this story for sympathy, and I didn't share it for the satisfaction of seeing my own son brought low, because I assure you there is no satisfaction in that, none at all. I shared it because there might be someone listening who is in the position I was in, and who is afraid, as I was afraid, that protecting yourself means you don't love your child, that setting a boundary means you're being cruel, that cutting off the tap of money means you're cutting off the connection. I am here to tell you, from the other side of it, that the opposite is true. Every dollar I gave Bradley after he turned 25 was a dollar that taught him he didn't have to grow up. Every problem I solved for him was a muscle of his that I let go soft. Every excuse I made for Tamsin was a permission slip for her to disrespect my wife. I thought I was loving my son. I was preventing him from becoming a man. If you have raised a child who has come to see you as a resource rather than a parent, please understand this. They did not arrive at that view alone. We helped them get there. Every time we said yes when we should have said no. And the only way back is to start saying no, and to mean it, and to hold the line even when they rage, and even when they cry, and even when they call you cruel. Real love sometimes looks like a closed wallet. Real love sometimes looks like a quiet no. Real love sometimes looks like watching your grown child fall, knowing you could catch them and choosing not to, because you finally understand that catching them is what broke them in the first place. A child who is never allowed to fail is a child who never learns to stand. And a parent who never says no is not a parent. They're a hostage. I am 64 years old. Eleanor is 62. We have, if we are lucky, 20 good years left. We intend to spend them as ourselves, on our own front porch, in our own modest house, with our own modest pension, watching our grandchildren grow into people we are proud of, with the help of a son who is finally, at 38, becoming a man. If you are listening from somewhere across this country of ours, or from anywhere else in the world, I'd love to know where you are. Drop a comment and tell me. And if there is someone in your life you have been carrying for too long, perhaps consider, gently, whether the most loving thing you can do is set them down. Sometimes the kindest word a parent can say to a grown child is not yes, it is no. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give the person you love is the dignity of letting them carry their own weight. Because dignity, real dignity, is something nobody can give you. It is something you have to earn, one honest day at a time. And no one, not even the parent who loves you most in this world, can earn it for you. Thank you for staying with me to the end of this story. Look after the people who love you. And if you are the person who loves, look after yourself too. Good night from Geelong.